All right, everyone, I'm here with a breakdown / gameplay video of Mr. Negative. I decided to kind of do this kind of stuff in the off season to do an overview or breakdown of champions that I play, and decided to go with my most recent rank up, Mr. Negative. So really excited for this champion. I was really happy I got to pull him, or that I got lucky and pulled him, and then of course, rank 3'd him immediately, and since it's probably the only one in our battle group, he'll most likely be on defense. But since we have the long off season, I've got a lot of time to test. Not so much in Act 7, since I'm kind of holding off on 100%ing that and trying to do the Karina challenges, but off-season wars, I'm going to get a little opportunity to use him. All right, some always active abilities. He's immune to Nullify, Stagger, and Fate Seal. He can reduce the opponent's degeneration effects by 40% for each unique debuff, and that's not just from the opponent, but if there's a node that has degen, he reduces it. And then when evading, he counterattacks with what is equal to a medium hit, and deals a burst of physical damage. For his heavy attacks, the first hit gives him a fury buff, and then if you're charging or holding a heavy, if he has 1 light energy, he has a 100% chance to evade. So that last mechanic there is what really draws me to Mr. Negative. All right, so I wanted to mess around with this degen effect and reducing it. So I found out versus Dormammu, for some reason buffs are getting converted into degen buffs via his Sig ability. I think it's because of the failure of it happening the first few times, it increases the chance. But I posted it on the Kabam forum, so we'll see if it's meant to happen that way. So I'm going to slow this down. I have a degen buff. You see that it's ticking for 139 damage. And what I was kind of hoping with Mr. Negative is that if I placed a debuff on Dormammu or my opponent, that 139 would be reduced. So let's see if that ends up working out here. I do have it slowed down so that we can see it clear as day. And here's a parry, and the degen damage doesn't drop. It stays at the 139. So what I found out through duels, and I have weakness on, so we're going to go ahead and see if he places a weakness as well. But I found out through duels that if the degen is already active and then you place a debuff, that it doesn't reduce it. So that's kind of the benefit of having weakness spec'd, is that you'll always hopefully have a debuff active so that when you do receive degen damage, that it's reduced degen by at least 40%. So with that being said, in this next one, we don't have a degen buff yet, but our weakness debuff is up. And we're actually going to see that I have a dex buff here, and I managed to parry. So I have 2 debuffs up, and then I trigger the degen. So here we go. It was 139 in the previous video. Now it's at 25. So it definitely dropped it, the 240%, so 80% from the 139 in the previous video, which is good. So it confirms that maybe when you're playing Mr. Negative and you want to avoid degen damage, especially unduped, because duped, you're going to be healing some of that degen back. But unduped, you're going to want weakness spec so that you can reduce the degen damage and basically make it as minimal as possible so that you're not taking a lot of damage. And here it is doing 76 damage with 1 debuff up. So it's a nice mechanic. Definitely hunting for the dupe so that instead of just taking damage, we are also healing from the damage. And then since we talked about that heavy evade, one thing I do want to point out, and a mistake I've made numerous times, is that his heavy does not charge forever. So you have to work in spots where you think the AI is going to be aggressive and come at you, instead of just deciding, hey, I'm going to charge a heavy in hopes that I can evade. Otherwise, the AI is going to make you look stupid, and it's just going to sit there and do this. So immediately after a special without retaliating, probably not the best window to do it. And there he goes, he dropped it, and I ended up taking a combo. All right, so how to build light energy. A well-timed block from either champ, and then dashing back when you have a buff, removes a buff and converts it to light energy for each buff you removed. Once you hit 10, a timer starts for 6 seconds, and anything additional during that 6-second window stacks on but expires when the 6 seconds is up. So if you build 10, 6-second timer starts, and then you build 2 more, wherever it is in that 6-second timer, let's say 4 seconds, that's all you've got of the 12. Then they expire, and then it starts back at 1. So max 20 is really hard to get and hold. Hitting 10 and holding 10 is really difficult. So most of the time, you're going to be looking to stop shy of 10 and possibly convert it to dark energy. It depends on what you want to do with it. When Mr. Negative is duped, there's an additional light energy property, and that's that you heal per second for each light energy you have when you have a degen buff on you. And I believe it's with a passive. Haven't tested it or seen it. But it is going to be nice to offset that degen damage with the healing. All right, so there are 3 ways to convert light energy into dark energy. One is to evade through that heavy. The second is to knock down. And then the third is, or to be knocked down. The third is using Sb1. Unlike light energy, dark energy lasts for 16 seconds once it reaches 10. So it's a little bit easier to build past that 10 and maybe hit that 20. But if you are suffering from disorient, dark energy is removed and you can't gain any until the disorient falls off. When you convert light to dark, the enemy gets a delirium debuff, which reduces their combat power rate and also inverts their controls. But versus an AI, that's not a big deal. That's more of like a defensive worry. But the negative 60% offensive combat rate is definitely helpful. It's nice to hit him in the face and not worry about power gain like that. Now, the other property when duped dark energy has is that it'll do damage like Void does for each dark energy per non-damaging debuff. So that's another reason to have weakness on when you have him duped. All right, so some Sb1 benefits. It converts light energy into dark energy. It also gives you a massive block proficiency increase for each light energy you convert. So if you're having to block a lot, then Sb1's probably the way to go. And then the final hit places a non-damaging debuff, an exhaustion buff. So plays into that degen reduction, and if he's duped, that damage over time per dark energy. So Sb1 has some potential to be part of his rotation, depending on what you need. All right, so what that looks like. We're at 13 converted, so that's 13 to that passive bulwark buff up there. And now when we block, the damage is significantly reduced. Heck, even parries are down to 0. So very helpful. Sb2 is probably where more of the damage comes in, plus this petrified debuff that lasts for 20 seconds and reverses healing and power, ability power rate by 80% is huge. So it's just 1, but if you have 10 dark energy, there's a second on the second hit, so 160%. Third hit places a degeneration debuff for 4,000 direct damage over 10 seconds. And then for each dark energy you have, there's an additional degen buff that gets placed for the same amount of damage. So if you have 3, you got the 1, that comes out to 4. So a lot of the dot damage from degen is going to come from here. There's a lot of burst damage that comes from here. And then that petrify is just awesome. 20 seconds is a long time. That's 5 seconds more than She-Hulk's. And the fact that you can place 2 is huge. One thing to keep in mind is that if you're not always at 10 dark energy, that's not a big deal, at least when it comes to regeneration rate. Because if you have despair maxed, then you only really need 2 dark energy, maybe even 1 dark energy to just completely reverse or stop healing. So it's a pretty nice Sb2. Right, so one mechanic you're going to get to see here is that heavy evade, and then you'll see I'll be able to immediately attack with either a special or a basic afterwards. So here we were at 10 dark energy. There's the 2 petrify, there's the 1 degen, and then here's the other 10. So that's 13 debuffs right off the bat, and non-damaging debuffs. So we have 3 currently placed between the, well, no, 4 between the 2 petrifies, the weakness, and the delirium. So if he's duped, that's 4 debuffs that he could be doing dot damage on. Now Sb2 converts the dark energy, so there's no dark energy to actually do that. So it would have to be a really quick turnaround of a couple dark energy. So it's not likely that after Sb2 you're planning on getting a lot of that dot damage. It's going to come from that degeneration. And the degeneration does scale with attack, modified attack. So if you're boosted, if you're on like a power shield node, that degen goes way up with his attack bonuses. Now SP3 is really interesting. First off, you inflict the delirium for 20 seconds, regardless of how much you convert X, Y, and Z. Depending on how much light energy you have, you're going to regenerate for 400, almost 500 health. And then for each dark energy consumed, you're going to deal a burst of direct damage as well. So in the perfect SP3 scenario, you're going to have 10 plus light energy and 10 plus dark energy, which again, with that 6-second timer on light energy is really tough, but at least you don't need to have the dark or the light energy converted to dark energy right before throwing the SP3. You need to just prepare with enough dark energy and then build that light energy. So what that looks like in an SP3 scenario. So we go through the animation. We were at 9 dark energy, and then I believe we were at 10 light energy. And you'll see Mr. Negative heals up 15% of his health, all while dealing some bursts of direct damage. So that damage does scale with attack bonuses, so it's not based off his base attack rating. So there's some potential with SP3, especially if you're trying to recover some health. Abilities aside, it's this evade heavy counter that is most interesting to me, or intriguing to me. I have 2 fights here that I kind of want to showcase it with, where I think it's going to really benefit a player. And that's with special attacks that you're not going to be able to easily retaliate without risking either a dex or a parry. So here we have Cosmic Ghost Rider's Sb1. If you were to retaliate that, you could get parried or dexed, or he might attack you and you attack him instead. So instead, we've built that light energy from dodging his Sb1. Now we find that window to throw the heavy and charge it, and then we get that evade counter. So we create an opening where there possibly wasn't without having to block an attack. So here's just another scenario of that same thing. War Machine's Sb1. Again, really hard to retaliate, but if we end up dexing the last part of it and then banking that dexterity buff, then we've created an opportunity to charge a heavy here to create an opening to go into a combo. So it's kind of like an Elsa evade, more so. So you've probably seen a few videos on how to play him. What I'm going to do is 2 fights on both ends of the spectrum. One where you don't trigger dex and you rely on parry heavy and just building that light and dark energy. Another where you just only dex and you try never to take a block hit. So here we are, parry heavy, building those furies, building the light energy. He's going to get to a bar of power. We're not going to dodge the special. We're going to block it and maybe get some light energy out of it. When we're about close to 10, we don't want to go right to 10 because they're going to cool down. We convert them with that heavy counter evade. Now we're building that light energy back up through the parry heavy. And then once we're at SB2 and he's below power, we convert it with a heavy attack here. Oh, after we block a few more. So convert it with a heavy attack here with the evade. And then we throw that SB2. And then we just stack on these 18 degen with 2 petrifies, and he just melts. So this is one way. The other way is to play as best as you can without taking a blocked hit. Now, his drop back is very quick and very big, so it's really hard to trigger dexterity in some circumstances. So building the light energy here is a lot harder, and you also saw me take a blocked hit, so that was unintentional. But basically, build to a healthy amount, convert it to dark energy, try and build it without getting cornered, obviously. Do some combos when you can. Bait out the SB1, dodge the SB1, bank the dexterity if you want to. If not, just go ahead and attack. And we're basically building light energy until we can get it to 10 dark energy. I think I stopped 1 short because we're already at SB2. Yeah. Right here. So It's a lot harder to build a lot of dark energy in this situation, but at least we do it without taking any blocked hits or damage. And then we're throwing it. And then letting the degen tick. So not as much, but you can survive a little bit more without taking blocked hits. Obviously, this one fails if they have True Strike or any evade stop. This is how I would play it. So a little more practical. Maybe start out the fight with a parry heavy. Immediately do the heavy counter when you see him coming. Take advantage of the combo, back off, and bank the Fury for another evade counter while he's below 1 bar of power. And now we've thrown in technically 11 hits, but because a heavy was 2 hits, it shows 13. So just a long, drawn-out combo while we're converting light energy to dark energy, and just taking advantage of these open windows to just hit him in the face. And then being happy with how much dark energy we have right before Sb2. I like cornering him into the wall and then throwing Sb2 to lay on the damage. So in a basic fight where you don't have to worry about power gain, this, that, and the other, that's probably how I'd play him most of the time. Now I've talked about some of the duped benefits, but one of the biggest one, and I'm going to take this Power Snack Mojo. In war, he does have suicide, so it goes a little bit quicker. But anytime that immunity kicks in, the Nullify, Stagger, or Fate Seal, the enemy takes a burst of damage. So on this Power Snack, every time the Power Snack fails and it says that I'm immune, Mojo's gonna take a burst of damage. So I'm gonna play it the way I said earlier, where I do some parry heavies, I take advantage of the opening, and I do the heavy evade, I combo, and I back off and bank the Fury. So we're laying on the damage, even though the poison here is doing a lot of damage. But what we're really looking at is that dexterity isn't triggering MD if he had MD, so I've tested that. Also, it's not triggering the Power Snack, so the power gain is really manageable here. Plus, you're going to see later with those dexterities that I'm activating dexterity during his anti-life, and I'm banking it without taking any degen damage. So I had weakness on in case I had taken degen damage, but you notice through the entire fight, not once did I trigger the degen. So in this scenario, especially versus Mojo, it makes him a very, very good counter, including to the node. Now this last one, luckily there was a champ here, not Domino, on Spite and Powerful from Afar. So what I wanted to see was, of course we can bypass Spite by always converting a buff, but what can we do against Powerful from Afar in regards to getting to that Petrify fast enough? So you're going to see here the beginning's kind of slow. I'm baiting out specials. I'm trying to convert light energy into dark energy. One thing with Powerful from Afar is that I can't necessarily throw that heavy charge in hopes that I can heavy, because if she decides to stay far away, she could get a bar of power and just hit me with it. So I'm deciding to stay a little bit closer than I would most other fights or normal fights. So here we are at Sb2. I managed to convert it before she went to Sb1, and here's the Petrify. So now the Powerful from Afar, it almost looks like it doesn't even exist. So if she is power gaining from the distance, it's very, very small. And then down she went. She might have had willpower. It was only a rank 2 Tigra, but it's hopeful for champs not Domino on this Spite Powerful from Afar node. And with the map not changing, I don't know. It's something to look at as a good counter for this node. But thanks. Hope you enjoyed the breakdown. Hopefully that helps you understand Mr. Negative a little bit more. Thanks for watching, and hit subscribe.